Good day, everyone. Welcome to the Innovation Alley podcast. We're here live at the Innovation Alley podcast studio at Site B on Adelaide McDermott Street, downtown Winnipeg, Exchange District. How much more specific can I get today, huh? We're here with
I'd like GPS coordinates,
Carrie
but
Stevenson,
Howdy.
Chris Johnson, and Kevin Guenther. Welcome.
Thank you.
And we're going to talk today about design and startups. And Kevin is the creative director of Kindoma. He actually home base for you is at Site B here.
Yep, right here.
And we talk about design actually a fair amount, especially you and I. We talk a lot about design, and we want to sort of do a bit of a chat about what startups need to consider around design, be it when to engage it, how to consider it. And then I want to get into the topic of what is industrial design versus design? Like, how do those things come into play? So, maybe you could kick it off and set context. As a designer in a startup, what do you find other startups do or don't appreciate?
Well, it's interesting because I think that startups, more than any other business group, appreciate design more than anybody else. And I think it's a unique position that they're in because, I don't want to say out of desperation, but I think it is a little bit out of desperation, right? They're trying to make an impact. They're trying to make a big splash when they first get on the scene. And previously I was involved in an organization called the Graphic Designers of Canada. I'm still a member, but I was on the board for several years, and I just went to a national AGM where they were talking about the state of design in this country, and there's still this overwhelming sense that businesses don't appreciate what design can do for companies, and it's almost like
it's a weird headset to be stuck in a rut with.
Yeah.
As a people, right? Designers as a people. I find that when we go out to the new media things here and we meet people in the space, it's always this, we can do so much, but nobody values our talent. Versus switching the gear into, I'm going to go out and crush it and show people my talents, startup style. And that's what makes a guy like you really rare, because I think you get that mentality, and you're a guy who will jump in and show the value. Why do you think more designers don't get that, or don't jump in that way?
I think it's a couple reasons. I think there's more of a junior mentality, which I think is what you may be referring to, which is straight out of college. You're sort of almost meant to feel like you're like this artist, right? Like design is art, and there is, I think, to be a really good designer, you need to think of what you do as art. To an extent.
Are we getting philosophical here?
Always. I
Isn't
can't
it
not.
art, Kevin?
Yeah.
Isn't it?
I can't. But the reality is let me just draw a really clear line. In reality, my definition between that difference is art is personal, it's self-expression, it's something you do for yourself, potentially for money, maybe not. Graphic design, specifically graphic design, which is a very big umbrella, it's art you do for other people. It's almost like commissioned work,
Right.
But it's not even art. It's an art of communication, right? It's being able to craft things that communicate extremely well for somebody else's end gains. It's not for you. It's not personal. It's for somebody else. And I think that it takes, when you're first out of college, it takes you a little while to sort of get into that mindset, to shift over that it's not about you anymore. This is about making a business profitable. It's about making a company sell products.
Well, that's maybe that's the theme I want to connect in on is design in startups. That golden age I think you're talking about. I think I appreciate it coming from government and enterprise, then small business, finally startups. The opportunity to articulate your culture as a business through design, it's so much easier in a startup phase, I find, where the four folks around the table have this vision. The design, as a designer, you can come in and everyone aligns to it. Yet, in contrast, when you're a 1,000-person organization, if design isn't done well, people very quickly disassociate themselves with the company culture, the logo, the brand we are today. They're like, oh, well, that's stupid. I'm working to be the person I am, but the business seems distant from you. So I think it's have you seen that yourself? That that design and culture go hand to hand in a startup.
100%. Yeah, but it not just in startups, but like in the bigger companies that really get it, and all you have to do is look south of the border, right? And you see like the Googles, the Apples, like even IBM now is making some really interesting moves in terms of embracing design as a culture.
Again,
right,
yeah.
That's really what it is. And this speaks to the second reason why designers are saying these things, like nobody appreciates what we do for them, is because when you're dealing with bigger companies or government agencies and things like that, unless there is cultural buy-in at the top, unless you've got a CEO or somebody in the highest level of the executive group that understands the value of design, it'll trickle down, and there's it will never be incorporated properly into the culture of the company. So that's, and I think on a national level, when I was speaking to this group at the national AGM, I think that's what they were experiencing. It was more that. It was more, and it's funny because, like I said, like after being involved with startups for 2 years and sort of like surfacing and coming up and seeing the rest of the world and how they deal with design in Canada, you can see that there's still a long way to go for a lot of these bigger companies, like the Manitoba Hydros of the world, or not to call anybody out, but although they do very well, they have their own design department. So, I mean, it's
nice save.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's other companies in Manitoba that do really well too, but they're, let's just say, companies on that level, companies of that size, that just they need to. Google is my favorite example, right? Like when the CEO finally decided that, I see why we're lagging behind companies like Apple, and it's because Apple has design as a culture at its core. Like they're born from design, and he realized that, well, we need to have that too. So when the CEO embraces that, and he just says, okay, it's time for everybody to make this cultural shift. I mean, it's unbelievable what Google was able to do in a span of 2 years in terms of embracing how design is going to reinvent that company, right?
Yeah. So decades ago, if you encountered a company representative and if you had a really snappy suit, that was the impression you'd get of that company. Like, this is well-organized company, that kind of thing. I don't know if that meme still exists today, because when I look at like a Kickstarter page or Indiegogo page, I'm actually looking a lot at the design. I look at how have they designed their product? How does it look? How does it feel? How does the video that they're showing? What is the design of that? And it seems to me that instead of looking for the snappy suit these days, there's a lot more emphasis on the design of what's coming out of a company that tells you a message about what the quality of that company might be. Yeah. Are you finding that as well?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're explaining in a nutshell what design is, what it does, right? It's about, it's not just about something that looks nice, but fundamentally, it solves a problem that you care about. That's a big part of design too. It communicates to you. It tells you about a product in a way that you understand it best, and it builds credibility in doing that. So how something looks is obviously a big part of that. How well it's executed is obviously a big part of that.
So if you had a strong enough design, do you think that could actually be the foundation for the company culture?
I mean, I'm biased, but I do. I think I place a lot of emphasis and importance on the value of design, and in how it can develop a company culture, how it can make not just the end users of the product or service feel better about what they're buying, but how it can make the employees and the people working on the product actually do a better job, take pride in their work, and sell that product. How they engage with it.
So as a startup, I found I asked the question, where do we get started? How do you educate yourself? From an entrepreneur myself, I always loved design, and I do consistently remember years just going and picking up the design magazine, flipping through it, and especially the year-end awards on great design. I like that. I copy this. I copy that.
Yeah.
There's lots of great things I stole that spoke to me, and then it wasn't. It took another 5 years of actually getting profitable before I could afford to hire a designer and start doing those things for ourselves internally in the company.
Yeah.
For a startup, how do you recommend them exploring design further, especially if they don't have an internal design person? Where should they start?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. That's a big challenge because, a reputable designer, somebody who's been in the business long enough to know what they're doing and can just jump in and...
Is there different kinds of designers?
Certainly different levels of skill. Yeah. I'm a CGD certified graphic designer, which is a certification that's handed out by the Graphic Designers of Canada, and that's one way of sort of knowing what skill level you're getting. Other than that, it's mostly a crapshoot. You just have to take a look at somebody's portfolio and hope that you're getting somebody who has actually done the work that's in their portfolio. But I think that what really makes the difference between somebody who takes a look at what good design looks like and says I really just want to recreate that,
Exactly, yeah.
and somebody who truly understands the brand, which is a whole other conversation that we could have, and can say, okay, I understand the brand, and why the brand has been developed the way it is, and who we're talking to, and then now I know how to communicate that visually and make it award winning, so that the people who look at it understand that brand immediately as well. That takes years of practice, I think, to get right. Now, in going back to your question about how do you actually engage somebody with that level of skill, I think that some of the techniques that companies are using now, startups that are using in Winnipeg and in other cities, are the only ways to do it, which is to offer equity, some form of stake in the company, right? And I think that works really, really well. It hasn't started to work yet in Winnipeg as well as it has in other markets. But
I would argue that it has.
It's getting better.
Yeah.
Certainly getting better.
I would say that I know of tangible examples where investments by creative companies early stage in a startup's existence have already started to pay off, and they've continued to be engaged in the company. But as the company grows and moves through successive stages of funding, where that pays off tangibly. Yeah. So it definitely works. I think the point is that there's not enough of them that it's a visible thing, and that's a behind the curtain type of thing. So it's hard to get up on a soapbox and point to, hey, here's who's doing it, here's the company they're doing it with, and here's the gains they've made. Yeah. That story is more difficult to tell. Yeah. But I think here in Winnipeg, and you're probably the guy to strap this onto, we probably need to circle back to the other rest of the design community and just at least purport, like, hey, by the way, this is working. Yeah. And maybe try and find the way to drive that home.
Yeah, and I think that, it can take some time before the real tangible payoffs begin to show up in your bank account too, right. Which is what everybody wants to hear, right? So I think that concept is still new enough in Winnipeg that there haven't been a lot of examples where somebody can come back and say, well, this is how I'm making my living working with startups. Yeah.
I think it needs to be a blend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that designers need to be a little more educated on the opportunities and, what are things like, what is convertible debt, and how can I take advantage of that, as a designer, somebody with my expertise, understanding the difference between accepting convertible debt, or spec work. A lot of people will take a look at your offer and they'll say, well, you're asking me to do spec. Yeah. And that couldn't be any further from the truth. So I think that is the best way, the best tool in the toolbox that startups have for engaging, really open-minded, really progressive thinking designers in this market right now.
Speaking of tools, how do you feel about those really cheap, get your logo for $5 kind of online contest things.
99 designs at all.
like
Freelancer.
Like, does that bother you, or like how does that grab you?
I don't know. I try not to be too preachy about that stuff because I understand there are times when you can't just open your door or pick up the phone and call the designer that you know and have that stuff done for you. So I think that it's in the right headspace. You're moving in the right direction when you don't have any other option and you need to use that sort of stuff. That said, I think that it should only be used as a short-term solution, because I think that there's a shallowness in most of those solutions that becomes sort of revealed over time, right? Like, it's more when you start getting into the conversation about a brand and developing a brand. That's when you start to see how those are really short-term solutions that don't have a lot of legs.
Yeah, so like the last thing we want to talk about, so in design versus industrial design, so, we, especially in the last, I'd say 24 months, folks who are doing the app and the cloud-based startups are now doing hardware-based startups.
Yeah.
We're seeing a lot more product design, be it crowdfunding or straight company launches. When somebody's doing a product specific development, what should they consider during design, and what is that relationship between design and an industrial designer? Because I find a lot of folks I talk to don't know the difference between those two.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that problem extends to a lot of other areas of design. Like when I earlier referred to graphic design as a very big umbrella. Yeah. You can look at user interface design within that. There's just branding and logo design. There are multiple different types of design. You can fracture it so many different ways, and that's just within the umbrella of graphic design. Yeah. And then industrial design clearly is the design of a tangible hardware product, something like the chairs that we're sitting on are a product of industrial design, right? A good example is the banner behind us, right? And you've got a combination.
Bad example, but
Well, yeah, we won't get into specifics, but you got a combination of graphic design plus industrial design, right? So you needed the industrial designer to design the actual stand,
physical good,
the physical good, and then the graphic designer designed the face of it. So and then you can talk about fashion design, you can talk about architectural design, interior design, like.
We don't have to, though, right?
I could if you guys want. How much more time do we have? Yeah. Design is literally the application of intent or a premeditated way of approaching the development of something that has not been created before, right? So, whatever space you're in, design is everywhere, and everybody does design.
So maybe that's the closing thought right there. Is just with a lot of the other folks we interviewed last week or two, is you talk about do it yourself. If we're a 4-person startup, money's tight. At what point in time would you say if they should be, before doing it themselves, or exploring the a business proposal with a designer, get some take some pref shares, or do some other form of deal, or hiring a party, what would be the decision process you would advise them to go through?
That's a really good question. I think picking up the phone and just seeing if anybody would want to just have a conversation with them is a good start, because a lot of designers are really open just to conversation. Yeah. They're not going to charge you for it. Some will, but some won't.
So you might get some free mentorship out of it. Yeah. You might find an organic relationship that grows. Okay.
Organizations like Futurepreneur are good for that.
Excellent.
They can go to Futurepreneur. Joelle will hook them up with somebody who will sit down with them like a design mentor in that sense. But I think... I think if you think you have, if you think you have the ability or the desire to want to do things yourself, you should try to do them. yourself. You know, like, I mean, everybody can empower themselves in this day and age now, right? I think if you also need to have some critical thought, and you need to be humble a little bit too, and be able to recognize when your efforts have fallen short, right? So,
Yep.
and in that case, you know, if you need a short-term solution like something from 99 Design, heaven forbid, go ahead and buy one of those logos, right?
There you go. Yeah.
But,
Awesome.
but yeah, that's the first start. And then
Great.
best case scenario, just get a designer involved on the founding level, somebody who's willing to invest.
Early. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, sir. It's a great conversation, and we hope to have you on to talk further about design in the future podcasts.
Sure.
So again, thanks as always.
Right on.